Hello, I'm JW. This time we're going to have a look at storage heaters, and this will be part one. There will be another part coming up in a few days or a week or so's time. Now, storage heaters have been around for a very long time, certainly many decades, and they really came to the forefront in the 1960s. And the main reason was that at the time, most of Britain's electricity was generated from burning coal. And of course, when you get to sort of the early evening and overnight, demand for electricity fell off dramatically as factories and things obviously closed. Because if you've got hundreds of tons of coal burning away in a big furnace, you can't just turn that off and switch it off for a few hours and then wait till the next day. And likewise, if you manage to turn it off, you can't then just relight hundreds of tons of coal in 5 minutes ready for the following day. So overnight there was a lack of demand and a basically oversupply of electricity, and therefore storage heaters were devised as a way of getting people to use a lot more electricity overnight, thereby avoiding the problem of having coal burning away and effectively being wasted. And storage heaters are very simple in operation. Basically a big box full of bricks and some heating elements. Heating elements heat up the bricks overnight, and then during the day those bricks release the heat more slowly and warm up your house. And to get people to actually buy and use these things, there's various schemes devised, and the general idea was that if you use these overnight, the electricity for those would be considerably cheaper than if you just use electricity during the day. Typically it started around sort of half the price, and these were sold as a whole home heating solution, quite often wrongly aligned with central heating, although of course they weren't actually like that. Now, storage heaters, say, really came about as a need to use extra large amounts of electricity overnight, and obviously this was aimed at the domestic sector, and this was certainly true in the sort of mid-60s. But there were some other factors as well which really accelerated the use of these things, one of which was the advent of nuclear power, because again, nuclear power generally runs 100% of the time as often as possible at full output, and it's not really pointful to just turn it off and not use it overnight. And that was coming in from the 1960s and certainly well into the 1970s. And the other thing which occurred was something called Ronan Point, which was a block of flats which had gas supplies into it, and not long after it was actually constructed there was a gas explosion and the whole block basically collapsed and killed several people. This happened in 1968, and from that point on it was viewed that gas was evil, and there were huge numbers of blocks of flats built after that time which didn't even have gas in them. So of course electric heating was the choice, and storage heaters would of course have been that. Now, as it turns out, the collapse of that was caused by a gas explosion, but the real reason it collapsed was that the building was defective and wasn't actually constructed properly, but of course that wasn't known until many years later. Now, of course, in the mid-60s there was huge amounts of literature and documentation and all kinds of advertising which went on to get these things promoted, and if we had a time machine we could go back there and get some of that. So let's just have a look at it, and here we have a nice selection. These were primarily from storage heater manufacturers, and also the electricity board itself. At the time there was no choice of where you got electricity from, it was all state owned, and all kinds of leaflets where it was just sort of promoting these things, various manufacturers, and as you can see these are all certainly of their time. Now if you have a look at this particular one here, this red one, we can see inside basically how these things actually work. Now this is from a manufacturer called Harper Heat, and 66 does indeed mean 1966, but most of these heaters were pretty much the same. Essentially you've got the outer case and obviously a front, and inside you've got these large blocks which are actually bricks, essentially made out of clay, magnetite and various other materials. Heating elements which fit into slots or channels within those bricks. Big pile of insulation on the front and also in the back in the case there, and it all just bolts together. So essentially what happens is overnight these heating elements just are switched on continuously for hours and hours. Heat's transferred into the blocks there, or the bricks, and of course this stores the heat, and then during the daytime these remain hot for a considerable number of hours and the heat is slowly released into your house. And so this is a pretty typical example here. They're all basically the same, came in different shapes, sizes and whatever, but the actual principles are the same. And the fancily named charge control unit on the front is in fact just a thermostat, only there really to make sure the thing doesn't get too hot and basically go on fire. But that's pretty much it. And even things that are made considerably more recently, They're all basically the same inside, it's just some kind of bricks or other medium to store the heat, load heating elements, and some appropriate insulation around them to attempt to keep the heat in. And attempt is right because, of course, when these things start heating up, although a lot of the heat does go into the storage bricks, a considerable amount actually leaks out into the room. So basically from the moment these are turned on, say at midnight or just after, heat is going to be coming out of them. And they do have some fairly basic controls on them, which we'll look at in the next edition. But suffice to say, they're going to be heating your house basically from the time they're switched on until the heat eventually runs out. Now this particular document, say, is from this Harper Heat Company. There's a little picture of it there. This stamp is for the sales agent at the time. And even from 1966, you can see the sort of shape of them. They didn't really change much in design because ultimately it's a box with some bricks and some insulation in, so pretty limited in design. And if you buy a storage heater today, it's surprisingly similar in appearance to that. And so this particular one comes from May 1965, as do most of these other documents here. We can have a look down here at some of the ludicrous claims they made. It's effectively slim, only 9.5 inches projection into the room. Well, that seems pretty fat, really, doesn't it? Fits flush to the wall and air cooled and all that. And of course, that's because it's cheaper to do it that way. And of course, they make all these things here. And the key point is here: it's provides sufficient heating on any off-peak tariff from minimum 8-hour night charge to maximum off-peak hours. Eventually, it's standardised on a 7-hour charge period, and that's where the Economy 7, which went on for many years, came from. It basically gave you cheap electricity for a 7-hour period. Now, on the back of this one, it gives you some indication of the heat output from the thing. This is all estimated and not particularly accurate, but it gives some general idea here. So, charges for 8 hours overnight in this case, say from 11 PM to 7 AM in that one. Obviously, it heats up. A lot of heat comes out, and then the heat output gradually declines over the course of the day and through into the afternoon. This one's actually shown here with a bit of a boost in the afternoon, which again was a thing which you could get, and in fact still can get in some areas. But essentially it's blazing hot by the sort of early morning there, 7 AM or whatever, and then the heat output gradually declines. And the idea is that they're sized appropriately so that by the time you get to 11 PM or whatever, there's still a little bit of heat coming out. Of course, that's just before it then goes back to the reheating time, and it will charge up again. Now, some people have had bad experiences with storage heaters, and that's typically where they're the wrong size, because if it's too small, of course, this will taper away to nothing long before the reheating time occurs. But the main problem with storage heaters is that they're heating your house all the time. So they're on basically 24 hours a day in terms of heat coming out. Of course, they're actually only on powered for that period here and possibly a boost. But once they've heated up, the heat's there, it's going to be coming out. Most of them had a sort of mechanical flap on the top, which you could cover up the actual holes through the middle of the brick so that less air came out and obviously less heat, but ultimately heat still comes out of the things. So if you wanted to heat your house permanently 24 hours a day, then they were great. Now, of course, in the 1960s, it was typically the case that of a family with, say, 2 adults and 2 children or something like that, that only one adult would actually be going out to work and the other one would be staying home all day. So at the time, heating a house all day, every day, wasn't actually a bad thing. Unfortunately, with more recent times where most people go out to work in the day, homes quite often are empty during the day, and that's where storage heaters really don't work anymore. Now we'll have a look at some of these other delightful leaflets, and these are certainly of their time. Models in swimsuits and claiming you got summer warmth through the winter with Thermair, another manufacturer of these devices. Theirs has a slightly different design. I won't say better, but anyway, it's got some fancy panels on the front. And then this one has these amazing colour pictures inside of where you can actually use these devices. So you can put it in all the rooms in your house. Look, in the bedroom, in the dining room, even in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs, so you can trip over it at night when you come down there. And this is where we're really going in for this central heating idea. It's not central heating, they're standalone units, but you can put them in all the rooms and heat all the rooms at the same time, which is kind of what they're flogging here. At the time, gas central heating was also a big thing, and these were sort of competing with that, so they were claiming it was some kind of viable alternative to it, which in some cases it was, but ultimately gas did win out in the end, because of course you can turn the gas heating on whenever you want and turn it off, whereas again these are heating a building 24 hours a day. And there it is in the living room with your nice 1960s furniture and your teak G-plan and all that stuff. And then there's the picture of the offending article on the back. Now I've got quite a lot of these. I'm going to look at all of them because why not? I mean, that's the whole point of getting that time machine out to look at them. Con Store, which is another one. Wood grain, of course, is a big deal here, but this isn't actually wood, it's just fake. It's generally metal with a painted finish over the top. So this is Con Store, again, warm air heating via off-peak electricity, all the same ideas. And again, here's your typical room settings where you can obviously place it in the corner unobtrusively. That's a grey one, obviously didn't want to pay extra for the wood grain effect. And again, this is similar to that graph we saw where it's just going to go through how the temperatures can be varied and whatever else. This kind of describes the unit plan, which was the electricity options you've got. This particular one is only 13 5/8 inches deep, which is easy to accommodate in corners or alcoves where it takes up no useful floor space. Well, that has to be the biggest lie ever, because it's a massive hulking piece of junk, and it's going to take up a colossal amount of space. 3 kilowatts electrical loading, so if that was on for your 8 hours, 24 kilowatt hours being poured into the thing, and then that will be distributed throughout the day later. And it's also quoting it in the British Thermal Units, or BTUs, because that was the thing at the time. This particular one starts at only 45 guineas, which was not exactly a bargain at the time. There's a lovely grey one, again with the teak G-plan furniture and all that stuff. That's only 38 guineas, that one. And same pictures here, there's one in the set, because it's not a room really, is it? And then there's some annoyed people sitting around their G-plan table, and there it is in the background. I mean, these are huge when you look at the scale of it compared to this. I mean, it's what, metre-and-a-half wide or something? I mean, it's ridiculous. And then here we are in the hallway with the telephone on the telephone table, because that's what you did in the 60s. You had your telephone in the hallway, there was no option, and you had a special piece of furniture to put on, although that's just a normal table. They couldn't afford the one with a seat in it. And on and on it goes. And again, this thing with the whole house heating, pushing it against the gas central heating, which of course was coming in at the time as well. Here's another one. This is the Thermodare. Same idea, same kind of looking things, because ultimately it's a box with bricks inside. And these have fancy names like Renoir and Rembrandt, for goodness sake. Did this fool anybody? Unfortunately it probably did, because they thought it was some kind of high quality item. And there's the Renoir in the dodgy looking set of a front room. And of course you can stick it at the top of the stairs there. And nice coloured 60s light fixture there. And there's another one with its sort of grille on the front there. Here's some from GEC. These really are monsters. I mean, look at the width of that, the fake wood grain effect. And again, they're going on this slimline thing, but they're not, are they? I mean, they were huge, great big machines. Only 8 inches, I mean, that's pretty fat, isn't it, really? And of course they made them slimmer by just making them much wider, so they took up the entirety of the wall. I mean, they're claiming it's the best looking one, but that's a matter of opinion. And you can put it in pretty much every room. Here's some child nursery with a plastic vinyl floor. And once again, sticking it in the hallway. And here's another one. This is printed in monochrome only with a bit of spot colour. Same concept. And again, this is from the Midlands Electricity Board. So again, this is primarily where you would have bought these things from at the time. That's the GEC one, and we've got Berries there, which is another manufacturer. And even people like Electrolux, which of course is still a brand that's around today. Good looks, well, they look the same as all the others, don't they, really? And it's again this unit plan thing where you can blend them in with your furniture, and it has this corner unit with a big thing in the corner here. And got a few down at the bottom there. Deluxe model, £24 3 shillings. The standard one is £21. This particular large one is £28 7 shillings, £25 4 shillings, and the corner unit, which is basically two of the SH11s and a corner attachment in polished wood, £50 and 8 shillings, and that's a 3 kilowatt affair, because obviously it's just two of them stuck together. And if you didn't want the storage heater in your bedroom, and you wouldn't because say they're on at night and they're going to be blazing hot at night, you can get these oil-filled radiators as an optional item to go in those rooms. Typical classic design there. Safe in any room, well they would be, wouldn't they? It's just basically two bits of pressed steel, oil filling, and then an electric heating element shoved in the bottom. And again, these are actually pretty expensive. I mean, this large one here, which is only 1.5 kilowatts, £21, 5 shillings, 9p. And bear in mind, this is back in the mid-60s. And of course, no heating system would be complete without one of these evil suicide heater devices. What you generally did with these was stick them above the bath on the wall with the cord hanging down, and you put plenty of flex on it so that when you pulled on the cord, it broke off the wall and fell down in the bath. So, moving on. Now lastly, we'll have a look at this one. Who has given the mink touch to half-price electric heating? Now this was Kenton, another manufacturer. So there were dozens of these manufacturers at the time. And as we can see here on this very shiny one, it's another big box that sits on the floor. This one has a seat on the top, so you can put your telephone there and then sit on it and have your conversations. Burnished rosewood and bronze furniture that heats your home. Yeah, and here is the telephone in question on the massive box in the hallway, and a little cushion there to sit under your open 1960s stairs, which are no longer permitted because you can't have massive open treads like that for various reasons. And these were 24 and 28 guineas, or 26 guineas. The cushion was extra, it says up there, so a bit of a rip-off. Now these were basically the same as the others in many ways, and it cuts the cost of heating because it's on off-peak electricity, and they can be at half and all that. Regular heat throughout the whole day, which, let's face it, was their massive downfall, or it certainly is these days. Fresh and clean, and this was really where they were trying to promote it against other forms of heating, because at the time coal fires were still in very large numbers in many, many homes, which of course were not clean and convenient at all. They were also, from this and in after this, were trying to go against the gas heating, implying that gas heating was somehow dirty and inconvenient. But that's what you've got there. And 2-year guarantee, which seems fairly ungenerous considering what's in it. And then this is the most interesting bit for these ones. Kenton stores its heat in water. So these didn't have bricks inside. You just basically filled them up with water, and then the water was used to store the heat in it. So think thermal stores you can obviously buy these days. Claims to give maximum safety and reliability, but that's highly doubtful, because anyone who's had a thermal store will know that they do have problems. And obviously the water can get contaminated with all kinds of stuff, so not necessarily a lot better than that. And then of course they were going about how they were easy to move, because of course you can drain the water out and then they weigh almost nothing. Storage heaters in general are very heavy, hundreds of kilograms in most cases. Not the kind of thing you should be attempting to move without dismantling it thoroughly first. And there's one of their wonderful items on the wall. That's the wall store. Very original naming. And Kenton's were actually made by Brush Electrical Engineering in Loughborough, which made a whole load of other stuff, and it was part of the Hawker Siddeley lot at the time. And this one's from March 1966. Now that was storage heaters from the 1960s, and after that of course they still continue to be promoted, but nothing really changed about them, because ultimately what can you change? It's a big box that heats up overnight and distributes heat during the day. And the only other types you could get, and you can certainly get now, had an additional convector heater stuck on the front. The idea being that if you ran out of heat halfway through the day, it just had effectively a heating element stuck on the front, which you could just turn on any time using that peak rate expensive electricity to provide a bit of extra. And the only thing that's happened more recently is basically what comes under something called Lot 20, and this is where storage heaters have to meet certain requirements. And the upshot now is if you buy a new storage heater today, it requires 2 supplies, and it has the storage part, obviously, as it always did, and it has a fan in the bottom and electronic controls and a fancy thermostat and an extra heater in the front to boost it up when things don't work out quite as planned. So in that regard, not a lot has actually changed. It's just they may be packaged slightly differently, and of course they cost a lot more now. The other thing that's changed considerably since the 60s is that at the time there were literally dozens of manufacturers making these things, whereas today there's only a few. Most of them are made by Dimplex under various names, and there's a couple of others, but that's pretty much it. So choices today are extremely limited, and even if you go for things like Creda and Unidair, well, guess what? They're all made by Dimplex anyway, so it's basically just a rebadging exercise. Now, before we actually go to the next part, which we're going to do, say, in a week or so's time, the only other thing about storage heaters is, particularly the older ones, all of those there usually contain huge amounts of asbestos. So if you come across any of those, certainly from the 60s, 70s and so on, then it's extremely likely that they have a large amount of asbestos inside. So if you actually come across any looking like that in those brochures, do not open them. Basically, if the opponent's going to get rid of them, all you can do is just disconnect the electricity supply and then leave it for someone to dispose of properly. It's going to be some asbestos removal contractor or whatever. They don't all have asbestos in, but a very large percentage did, certainly before about 1974. It was pretty common for them to be stuffed full of the stuff, so just beware of that. You do not want to be opening that and billowing asbestos all over the place. Now, next time we're going to have a look at an actual storage heater. It's not as old as those, and it certainly doesn't contain asbestos, but we'll have a look at it anyway, take it apart, see what's inside, and also have a look at how you can troubleshoot these things, because they can and do go wrong, but they're pretty simple to repair. So until next time, thanks for watching.